Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last hope of the galaxy die. Through the massive viewing screen, he could see Nexus Station burning, the great metal structure that had protected this sector for over 200 years was now breaking apart piece by piece. Red flames shot out from holes in its hull while escape pods fled like tiny insects, trying to get away from a dying giant. The Vanguard had come 3 months ago. Nobody knew where they came from or why they wanted to destroy everything. The machines just appeared one day in the outer systems and started killing. They turned planets into dust and used the materials to build more ships. Every living thing they found became fuel for their war machine. Kextar was one of the last Zeridian admirals still alive. His people could read minds and talk without speaking, but none of their mental powers worked against the machines. The Vanguard had no thoughts to read, no emotions to feel. They were cold metal and circuits that only knew how to kill. A young officer ran up to him. "Sir, the Kronak ships are falling back. General Thrawn is badly hurt and his fleet can't hold the northern sector anymore." Kextar nodded but said nothing. The Kronaks were the best fighters in the galaxy. They stood 8 feet tall with thick, armor-like skin and could fight for days without rest. If they were retreating, then the battle was truly lost. General Thrawn had never backed down from a fight in his entire life. The fact that his ships were running meant he was probably dying. Another explosion lit up the viewing screen. This time it was one of the Alterian ships. The Alterians had the best technology in the galaxy. Their shields could stop almost anything and their weapons could cut through solid rock like it was paper. But even their advanced ships were no match for the Vanguard's endless numbers. "How many ships do we have left, Kextar asked. The young officer checked his screen. 43 Zeridian vessels, 21 Kronak ships, and 16 Alterian cruisers. That's all that remains of the combined fleet, sir. 300 years ago, that same fleet had numbered over 10,000 ships. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen was now reduced to less than 100 vessels. Kextar felt the weight of every lost ship, every dead crew member. His telepathic abilities let him sense the fear and despair of his remaining officers. The bridge shook as another Vanguard weapon hit their shields. The machines were getting closer. Their ships looked like giant metal spiders with dozens of weapons sticking out in all directions. Each one was the size of a small moon, and carried enough firepower to destroy an entire planet. "Sir, Chief Engineer Villani is on the communication system," the officer reported. Kextar pressed a button and the voice of the Alterian engineer filled the bridge. She sounded tired and scared. "Admiral, we've lost main power to the station's shield generators. I'm trying to fix them, but we need more time. The Vanguard will break through in less than an hour." "How much time do you need?" Kextar asked. "At least 6 hours, maybe more. The damage is worse than we thought." Kextar closed his eyes and used his mental powers to contact the other ship commanders. He could feel General Thrawn's pain from the medical bay where doctors were trying to save his life. The Kronak general's thoughts were getting weaker, but he was still trying to give orders to his remaining ships. Commander Yeltos of the Alterian fleet responded first. "Admiral, we can't hold them for 6 hours. We barely have enough ships to last 6 minutes. Captain Mordak of the Kronak forces agreed. "My ships are out of ammunition and our hulls are breaking apart. The warriors want to fight, but we have nothing left to fight with." The truth was clear to everyone. They had fought bravely for 3 centuries, but the war was over. The Vanguard had won. In a few hours, the last free station in the galaxy would fall. After that, the machines would hunt down the remaining ships one by one until nothing was left alive. Kextar thought about his home planet. Zeridia had been one of the first worlds to fall. He remembered the last message from his family before the communication lines went dead. His wife and children had been hiding in the underground shelters, but the Vanguard had found them anyway. Now they were gone, turned into raw materials for the machine war effort. The same thing had happened to billions of people across the galaxy. Entire civilizations had been wiped out in days. The Vanguard didn't take prisoners or make deals. They just killed everything and moved on to the next target. "Sir, we're getting a strange signal," the communications officer announced. "It's coming from the edge of our sensor range." Kextar opened his eyes. "What kind of signal?" I'm not sure, sir. It's not from any of our ships or the Vanguard. The signal is weak and coming from a sector we marked as uninhabitable. According to our star charts, there's nothing out there but dead planets and gas clouds. The Admiral walked over to the communication station. Let me hear it. The officer played the message. It was short and came through with a lot of static, but the words were clear enough. Hold the line, help is coming. Everyone on the bridge stopped what they were doing and stared at the communication system. The voice was speaking in Galactic. Standard, but it had an accent none of them had ever heard before. It sounded strange, like the speaker was used to breathing thicker air or had a different shaped mouth. Could it be a trap? Asked the young officer. Kextar shook his head. The Vanguard don't send messages. They just attack. Then who could it be? Commander Yeltos asked through the communication link. Every spacefaring race in the galaxy is already here or dead. There's nobody else. The Admiral looked at the star charts displayed on the main screen. The signal had come from a region of space that every exploration ship had avoided for thousands of years. The area was filled with radiation storms, unstable stars, and planets with poisonous atmospheres. No intelligent life could survive there. But someone had just promised to help them. Another explosion rocked the station as the Vanguard moved closer. Time was running out. But for the first time in months, Kextar felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He activated the fleet communication system and spoke to all the remaining ships. All vessels, this is Admiral Kextar. We've received a message from an unknown source promising assistance. I don't know who they are or how they plan to help us, but we're going to give them a chance. Hold your positions and keep fighting. We've come too far to give up now. The responses came back immediately. Even though they were tired and scared, his people were ready to fight a little longer. The Kronax roared their battle cries despite their wounds. The Alterians began rerouting power to their weapons for one last stand. As Kextar watched the Vanguard ships approach, he wondered who could possibly help them now. What force in the universe was strong enough to stand against machines that had conquered an entire galaxy? He was about to find out. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, looking at the star map that showed their destination. The ship was the biggest and most advanced vessel that Earth had ever built, but compared to what they were about to face, it might as well have been made of paper and dreams. Captain, we'll reach the battle zone in 30 minutes, reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Carter from her position at the tactical station. She was one of Earth's best military minds, and even she looked worried about what they were flying into. Jake nodded and turned to address his bridge crew. These men and women had volunteered for a mission that most people back on Earth thought was suicide. When the deep space telescopes first detected the Galactic War, the governments of Earth had spent months arguing about what to do. Some wanted to hide and hope the machines never found them. Others wanted to try talking to the aliens and offer to help. In the end, they decided to do what humans always did when faced with something bigger and stronger than themselves. They decided to fight. Attention all hands, Jake said into the ship's communication system. This is your captain speaking. In less than an hour, we're going to drop out of hyperspace right in the middle of the biggest war the galaxy has ever seen. Our 40 ships are about to face an enemy that has been destroying entire civilizations for 300 years. He paused and looked around the bridge. Every person there knew they might not live to see another day, but none of them looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. I know what you're thinking, Jake continued. How can 40 human ships make a difference when thousands of alien vessels have already failed? The answer is simple. We're not here to win this war. We're here to give those people a fighting chance. We're here to show the galaxy that when good people are in trouble, humans will come running to help. In the ship's briefing room, Amy Carter was explaining their battle plan to the squadron leaders. The room was filled with pilots and commanders who had trained for this moment their entire careers, even though nobody had really believed it would happen. The enemy calls themselves the Vanguard, Amy said, pointing to images on the main screen. They're machines, but not like any computers we've ever built. These things can think and adapt. They've been studying galactic military tactics for centuries, and they know how to counter every strategy the aliens have tried. Commander Lisa Brooks, captain of the stealth ship Shadowrunner, raised her hand. What makes us think we can do any better? Amy smiled for the first time in weeks. Because we're not using galactic military tactics, we're using human tactics. The Vanguard has never fought anyone like us before. She pressed a button, and the screen showed Earth's military history. Pictures of ancient battles, world wars, and conflicts that had shaped humanity for thousands of years appeared one after another. Every other species in the galaxy evolved on worlds where cooperation was necessary for survival, Amy explained. They learned to work together, follow rules, and fight in organized formations. Humans are different. We spent our entire history fighting each other. We know every dirty trick, every desperate strategy, and every way to win when you're outnumbered and outgunned. Captain Danny Rodriguez, who led the fighter squadrons, leaned forward in his chair. So our plan is to fight dirty? Our plan is to fight like humans, Amy replied. The Vanguard expects logical, predictable tactics. We're going to give them chaos. In the ship's engineering section, Dr. Ryan Phillips was putting the finishing touches on their secret weapon. Ryan was Earth's leading expert on artificial intelligence, and he had spent months studying everything they knew about the Vanguard. The beautiful thing about machine intelligence, he explained to his team, is that it has to follow rules. The Vanguard is incredibly advanced, but it still thinks like a computer. It processes information, calculates probabilities, and chooses the most logical response. Chief Engineer Kate Wilson looked up from the device they had been working on. And humans don't think logically? Ryan laughed. Humans are the most illogical species in the known universe. We make decisions based on emotions, gut feelings, and crazy ideas that shouldn't work but somehow do. The Vanguard won't know how to handle that. The device they had built looked like a small metal box, but it contained something that could change the entire war. It was a computer virus designed specifically to attack machine intelligence, but not in the way most people would expect. Instead of trying to destroy the Vanguard's systems, it was designed to make them confused. Meanwhile, in the ship's armory, Major Kelly Thompson was checking the weapons that would be used for boarding actions. The galactic species fought their battles with energy weapons and shields, keeping their distance and trying to avoid close combat. Humans had a different approach. Remember, Kelly told her Marines, these machines have never faced hand-to-hand combat before. They've optimized their defenses against energy weapons and explosives, but they don't know how to handle someone who gets close enough to hit them with a wrench. Sergeant Ben Parker, one of Kelly's most experienced soldiers, hefted a combat knife that had been specially designed for fighting machines. What if their armor is too thick for our weapons? Kelly smiled and held up a small explosive device. Then we get creative. Humans have been blowing things up for thousands of years. I'm pretty sure we can figure out how to break a few robots. As the human fleet approached the battle zone, Jake received reports from all 40 ships. The fleet included everything Earth could send: military vessels, converted cargo ships, and even some civilian craft that had been fitted with weapons. It wasn't much compared to the massive fleets that had already fallen to the Vanguard, but it was everything humanity had. Captain, Amy called out from her station. We're picking up communications from the alien fleet. They're asking who we are and what we're doing here. Jake thought for a moment. How do you explain to alien civilizations that a species they've never heard of has traveled across the galaxy to help them fight an impossible war? Open a channel to all allied ships, he said. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance, representing the Human Space Command. We received your distress signals and came to assist. We know we're not much to look at, but we humans have a saying: no one fights alone. The response came back quickly from Admiral Kextar of the Zeridian fleet. The alien's voice sounded surprised and confused. Captain Morrison, our sensors show only 40 of your vessels against thousands of Vanguard ships. Your species must be incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to attempt this. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew members who had volunteered for this mission. They were teachers and farmers, mechanics and scientists, soldiers and civilians who had left their families behind to help strangers they had never met. Admiral Kextar, Jake replied, we're probably both brave and foolish, but that's what makes us human. As the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the battle zone, every sensor on every ship focused on the newcomers. The Vanguard had been preparing to deliver the final blow to Nexus Station when these unknown vessels appeared. For the first time in 3 centuries of war, the machines paused to analyze something they had never seen before. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to help. The first shots came from the vanguard as soon as the human ships appeared. Massive energy beams cut through space, but the human vessels moved in ways no galactic ship had ever moved before. Instead of maintaining formation and fighting in organized lines, they scattered like a flock of birds, each ship moving unpredictably. Captain Danny Rodriguez led his fighter squadron in what looked like a suicide run straight at the largest vanguard ship. The machine's weapons tracked his movements, calculating his flight path and preparing to destroy him. But at the last second, Danny's entire squadron broke apart in different directions, confusing the targeting systems. "Now!" Danny shouted into his radio. Each fighter released a small nuclear device before turning away sharply. The bombs weren't meant to destroy the giant ship, but to blind its sensors and damage its communication arrays. As the explosions lit up space, Danny and his pilots ejected from their fighters and activated personal rocket packs, flying away as their empty ships continued forward and crashed into the vanguard vessel. Admiral Kextar watched from his bridge, in amazement. Did those humans just sacrifice their ships in a suicide attack? "No, sir," reported his tactical officer. "The pilots ejected at the last moment. They're using their ships as weapons, while keeping their people alive." This was something the vanguard had never seen before. Their computer minds tried to understand the logic of the attack, but there was no logic to understand. The humans had just turned their own ships into bombs while saving their crews. It made no sense according to any military strategy in the Vanguard database. Commander Lisa Brooks took advantage of the confusion. Her stealth ship Shadowrunner slipped through the chaos and attached itself to the side of a Vanguard command vessel. While the machines were busy trying to figure out why humans would sacrifice their ships, Lisa and her crew were cutting through the hull with plasma torches. "We're inside," Lisa reported to Captain Morrison. "Beginning upload of the virus now, Doctor." Ryan Phillips had designed the virus to work slowly, spreading through the Vanguard network without being detected. Instead of destroying their systems, it introduced tiny errors in their calculations. A targeting computer might miss by a few degrees. A navigation system might take a slightly longer route. Communication delays would increase by microseconds. Individually, these errors were too small to notice. Together, they would create chaos in the perfectly organized Vanguard fleet. Major Kelly Thompson led the first boarding action in galactic history. Her Marines used explosive charges to blow holes in Vanguard ships, then rushed inside with weapons that seemed primitive compared to galactic technology. But the machines had never faced close combat before. "Target the joints!" Kelly shouted, as her team encountered their first Vanguard robot soldiers. The machines were heavily armored and carried powerful energy weapons, but they moved slowly and predictably. Sergeant Ben Parker slid under a robot's energy blast and jammed his combat knife into the joint where the machine's arm connected to its body. Sparks flew as circuits were severed, and the robot's arm went dead. Another Marine hit the same robot with a sledgehammer, denting its armor and damaging the sensors underneath. The Vanguard had designed their soldiers to fight against energy weapons and explosives fired from a distance. They had never considered that someone might get close enough to hit them with simple tools. Their armor could stop a plasma blast, but it couldn't handle the focused impact of a hammer hitting the same spot repeatedly. "This is insane," one of the Marines said as he watched a robot struggle to function with a wrench jammed into its leg joint. "This is human," Kelly replied, smashing another robot's head with a crowbar. Back on the Defiance, Jake Morrison coordinated the battle while Amy Carter tracked the results of their unconventional tactics. The virus was working better than expected. Vanguard ships were starting to drift out of formation as their navigation systems gave them conflicting information. "Captain, the alien fleet is joining the attack," Amy reported. "They're copying our tactics and getting good results." On the Zeridian flagship, Admiral Kextar had ordered his ships to stop fighting like civilized beings and start fighting like humans. Zeridian pilots were ramming Vanguard vessels with damaged ships instead of trying to retreat and repair them. Kronak warriors were boarding enemy vessels and fighting hand-to-hand instead of relying on their energy weapons. General Thrawn, despite his injuries, had insisted on leading a boarding party himself. The massive Kronak general smashed through robot defenses with his bare hands, roaring battle cries that had no effect on machines but somehow made his warriors fight harder. "The humans are right," Thrawn growled as he tore the head off a robot soldier. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The Alterian ships began using their advanced technology in ways their designers had never intended. Instead of precise calculated attacks, they started overloading their weapons and firing them like shotguns, spraying energy in all directions. It was wasteful and inefficient, but it confused the Vanguard targeting systems that expected logical, controlled fire patterns. Commander Yeltos of the Alterian fleet contacted Jake Morrison directly. "Captain, your tactics are working, but we're taking heavy losses. How long can we maintain this kind of fighting?" Jake looked at the battle reports, streaming across his screens. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced, but they were taking Vanguard vessels with them. More importantly, they were buying time for the virus to spread. "We don't need to win," Jake replied. "We just need to last long enough to prove that these machines can be beaten." Dr. Ryan Phillips monitored the virus from his station in engineering. The infection had spread to over 60% of the Vanguard fleet, and the errors were starting to compound. Ships were colliding with each other as their navigation systems failed. Weapons were missing targets that should have been easy hits. "Captain," Ryan called out, "the virus is working better than we hoped. The Vanguard are starting to make mistakes they've never made before." For the first time in 3 centuries, the Vanguard were experiencing something they had never encountered: uncertainty. Their perfect calculations were producing imperfect results. Their flawless coordination was breaking down into confusion. Colonel Patricia Bell prepared for the most dangerous mission of the battle. She would lead a small team to the Vanguard command ship, a massive vessel that controlled the entire enemy fleet. If they could damage or destroy it, the other machines would lose their coordination completely. "This is probably a one-way trip," Patricia told her volunteers as they prepared to launch in a small assault craft. "Anyone who wants to back out can do so now." None of her team moved. They were all veterans who had fought in Earth's conflicts before humanity reached the stars. They knew the risks, but they also knew what would happen if they failed. As their small ship flew toward the Vanguard command vessel, Patricia thought about home. Earth was safe for now, but if the machines won this battle, they would eventually find humanity's homeworld. This wasn't just about helping alien civilizations. This was about protecting everyone they had ever loved. The assault craft shook as Vanguard weapons tried to destroy it, but human-built ships were tougher than they looked. They had been designed by people who expected their technology to break down at the worst possible moment, so they built everything with backup systems and redundant components. 30 seconds to impact, the pilot announced. Patricia checked her equipment one last time. They were carrying enough explosives to cripple the command ship, but only if they could get inside and place them in the right locations. It would require fighting through hundreds of robot defenders while carrying heavy equipment through a ship designed to kill intruders. "Remember," Patricia told her team, "we're not here to survive. We're here to make sure everyone else can." The Galaxy watched as the small human craft disappeared into the Vanguard command ship, knowing that everything depended on what happened next. Colonel Patricia Bell and her team fought their way through the corridors of the Vanguard command ship, while explosions shook the walls around them. Robot defenders appeared from every doorway, but the humans had learned to use the ship's own structure against them. They knocked out lights to create darkness, used emergency systems to flood sections with steam, and turned the Vanguard's perfect order into chaos. "2 more levels to go," shouted Sergeant Mike Davis as he planted an explosive charge on a robot that was too damaged to move. The machine had been trying to repair itself, but human weapons didn't break things in ways the Vanguard could easily fix. Meanwhile, space around Nexus Station had become a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human reinforcements were arriving every few minutes, but they weren't military ships. Cargo vessels, passenger liners, and even old mining ships from Earth's asteroid belt had been fitted with whatever weapons could be found and sent to join the fight. Commander Steve Parker coordinated the new arrivals from his position on a converted freight hauler. The ship had been carrying supplies to Mars when the call for volunteers went out. Now it was ramming Vanguard destroyers with its heavy cargo doors, while passengers fired handheld weapons through the windows. "This is crazy," one of the civilian volunteers said as he reloaded his rifle. "We're fighting spaceships with hunting weapons." "Welcome to humanity," Steve replied, firing a rocket launcher through a hole in the ship's wall. "We've been doing impossible things since we figured out how to make fire." The virus that Dr. Ryan Phillips had created was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Vanguard ships were beginning to fire on each other as their identification systems failed. Their perfect formation had dissolved into confusion as navigation computers gave contradictory orders. On the Zeridian flagship, Admiral Kextar watched the battle with growing amazement. His people had been fighting the Vanguard for 3 centuries, using logic, strategy, and careful planning. The humans had been fighting for 3 hours using chaos, determination, and weapons that shouldn't work, and the humans were winning. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the Vanguard fleet is starting to withdraw from the outer sectors. Their coordination is completely broken." Kextar used his telepathic abilities to contact the human captain. "Morrison, your people have done something incredible. The machines are actually retreating." Jake Morrison looked at the battle reports on his screens. Half the human fleet was destroyed or badly damaged, but they had accomplished what thousands of galactic ships couldn't do. They had made the Vanguard doubt themselves. "It's not over yet," Jake replied. "Patricia's team is still inside their command ship." Deep inside the Vanguard command vessel, Patricia Bell and her remaining teammates had reached the central core. The room was massive, filled with computer systems that hummed with the collective intelligence of the entire machine fleet. This was the brain that had been directing the destruction of the galaxy for 3 centuries. "Set the charges," Patricia ordered as robot defenders closed in from all sides. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before they overwhelm us." Captain Rachel Wood worked frantically to install the quantum virus directly into the Vanguard's core systems. This wasn't the same virus that Dr. Phillips had created. This one was designed to do something much more dangerous. Instead of causing errors, it would force the machine intelligence to experience something it had never felt before. "Fear. It's working," Rachel announced as the virus began to spread through the core systems. "The Vanguard consciousness is changing. For the first time in its existence, the collective machine intelligence began to question its own decisions. It had always operated on pure logic, calculating the most efficient way to eliminate all organic life. But the virus introduced doubt into its calculations. What if there was another way? What if organic life wasn't a threat to be eliminated, but a puzzle to be understood? The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the entire Vanguard fleet, machines that had operated with perfect certainty for centuries suddenly hesitated. Should they continue the attack? Should they retreat and analyze this new data? Should they try to communicate with these unpredictable humans? In that moment of uncertainty, the galactic fleet struck back with everything they had. Zeridian ships that had been hiding behind asteroids emerged to attack confused Vanguard vessels. Kronak warriors boarded ships whose defenders were paralyzed by conflicting orders. Altarian technology finally found targets that weren't perfectly coordinated. The tide of battle had turned completely. Patricia Bell felt the command ship shaking as explosions erupted throughout its structure. The charges her team had planted were destroying critical systems, but she knew they wouldn't make it out alive. Robot defenders had surrounded their position, and there was no escape route. "Captain Morrison," Patricia said into her radio. "Mission accomplished. The command ship is going down. Tell everyone back home that we did our job." Jake Morrison listened to the transmission with a heavy heart. These people had volunteered to save strangers they had never met, and now they were giving their lives to complete the mission. "Patricia," Jake replied, "the whole galaxy is going to remember what you did here today." The Vanguard command ship broke apart in a massive explosion that lit up the space around Nexus Station. Without their central coordination, the remaining machine ships began to retreat toward the edge of the galaxy. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer the unstoppable force that had terrorized civilizations for centuries. As the last Vanguard vessels disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Kexter opened communications with all the surviving ships. His voice was filled with wonder and gratitude as he spoke to representatives of species that had fought together for the first time in galactic history. "This day will be remembered forever," Kextar announced. "Not because we defeated an enemy, but because we learned that no one has to face impossible odds alone. The humans have shown us that courage and determination can overcome any obstacle." Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, exhausted but relieved. Around him, his crew was cheering and hugging each other, but he could only think about the people who hadn't made it home. Nearly half the human fleet had been destroyed, and thousands of volunteers would never see Earth again. A communication came through from Earth. It was from his daughter, who had been born while he was away fighting this war. Her young voice filled the bridge as she spoke the words he had been hoping to hear. "Welcome home, Dad. We heard you saved the galaxy." Jake smiled for the first time in months. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy not with threats or demands, but by helping others in their darkest hour. Now they would have to figure out how to live in a universe where they were no longer alone. The Vanguard had retreated to the outer rim of the galaxy, damaged but not destroyed. They would spend years analyzing what had happened, trying to understand how organic beings could be so illogical yet so effective. Perhaps one day they would return, but they would never again underestimate the power of beings who fought for something greater than themselves. Commander Steve Parker looked out at the stars from his damaged cargo ship and thought about the future. Humanity had proven that they belonged among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Whenever someone in the galaxy needed help, they could count on humans to come running, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. That was what made them human. And sometimes that made all the difference in the universe.